yeah! This is Gridiron 360. As always, Bill Manis at the helm. And the navigator of the ship, Mr. Dave. What's up, Dave?
What's going now?
We are going to preview college football week 3. Excitement, starting to get into it. Slate doesn't look that exciting. Still, we'll talk about it.
We will, and if it starts to slide, we're going to discuss the hot dog. Is it a sandwich? People, stay tuned. It's going to get exciting.
I mean, it is meat between two pieces of bread.
I hear you.
Or is it one piece of bread? You know, I've had some bad buns that, you know, you get it in there and then the bottom breaks out and then it separates it into two. I just don't know.
I don't. And is it a blue dress or is it a white dress with gold? I don't know. These are things that seriously.
We like to boggle the mind and tease
topics.
the brain. We're going to run down, the majority of the slate. It isn't a super high-end weekend for matchups, but we will address ones that, quite frankly, that we feel are important.
Yep.
We hope you do too.
Yeah, and understand. I mean, just think about last week. There was a team that came from West Point and went out to Michigan, so there will be games that will be entertaining. You might need to be a little quick on your dial, jump around to find which game is competitive within this slate, but it matters, and these are weeks where stumbles can become a regular.
Yeah, that's if you're a college football live watch on ESPN, that was one of the topics this week was, no really marquee matchups that we can see or that they saw, but this was the week last year, and then I think it was week like 4 as well, where you started to see some people go down that totally was unexpected and kind of slaps you in the face. We'll see if that is a trend. I mean, look, it is college football. They're 18 to 22-year-old kids, and it doesn't matter sometimes how good you are. Any given Saturday, somebody can lose, even the good guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Even the good guys. So, actually, we'll start off with it is actually Friday the 13th.
Dun, dun, dun.
There are 2 games tonight, which are actually possibly some of the better matchups of the weekend.
Yeah.
ACC matchup, the return of the Mac and his North Carolina Tar Heels are not even going to get on a bus. I think they're just going to get a crossing guard to walk them across the street to Wake Forest. And taking on the Deeks. And so, North Carolina looking pretty good right now, and I'm happy for Mac Brown. And going to go over and play Wake, and Wake is quietly done their thing. They haven't played huge opponents, but they're someone that North Carolina I don't think should take lightly. I definitely think they're better. I mean, they may not be great, but we can have a discussion on a different day comparing either side of the ACC for that matter to an SEC East, and I'll talk about it all day and argue it at least right now. But anyways, we move on. So North Carolina at Wake. I'm very happy for Mac Brown. I'm excited. I hope the streak continues. Their young quarterback, Sam Howell, the incoming 5-star recruit, is looking good. He has a little bit of a swagger, this kid. He's not quiet like Trevor, kind of just reserved and goes out and does his thing, but he's not like arrogant in my mind to the point where he's jumping all around, trying to, get the, crowd into it, egg people, whatever you might want to say. But he does kind of have a moxie on the field, I feel like. So it could be interesting. Like I said, I would not take Wake Forest lightly. They're not a doormat. If you're not ready, they can get they're very well coached and they can get their thing going on. And it is home for Wake, even though it is, not maybe like a semi-home game for the Tar Heels. You got all those guys right in the same area right there, that like tobacco triangle or whatever they call it. So, talk to me, buddy. What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, here's what I see. I'm not real big on the Vegas lines for college football, but it is something of interest to me is that Wake Forest is giving 3 points to UNC.
So it's a push.
Typically, it's a push on
if you're the home team giving 3, it's a push, at least on the NFL level.
Yeah. So, but what's interesting about that is I will say this: I've watched Wake 2 weeks in a row. They have a pretty interesting offense. It's not your Jim Grobe complete misdirection. Trying to use athletes that are, definitely a step down from some of the bigger competition where they just try to fool you all game. And if you're not tackling well,
and they still do that, but
yeah,
before it was all misdirection.
Yeah, it's just, this was a team where you had to be sound in your reads, you had to be good with your eyes, and play discipline against them. I guess what I'm trying to say is that Wake Forest's offense to me is a little bit more complete than what I've probably seen in the past. Mm-hmm. They might be able to line it up with you. I love their fullback / tailback, whatever they call them. Their little mini man.
Cade Carney?
Yep, Cade Carney. The guy's a little truck. I keep thinking he's little. He's really actually not that short. But he's definitely, it's maybe because he's so wide.
Yeah,
he looks a little shorter.
He's my height. He's 5'11", 216 pounds, weighs a little more than Daddy.
But he runs tough, and I like that. It is a little bit surprising. I feel like UNC, maybe they don't value the competition on paper. Their first 2 games looked a heck of a lot tougher than Wake Forest. Going in and playing South Carolina and then taking on Miami. I know Miami got out of the gate with a loss, so that's not as good of a look in their minds. I think UNC is the stronger team based off the eye test that I've seen. I do like Sam Howell. Again, I mentioned he was a Florida State recruit for a very long time, committed for well over a year. And then at the end, with the change in our offensive coordinator, decided to stay home in North Carolina. He reminds me in some ways a little bit of a Baker Mayfield, a little bit more of a runner and a little more comfortable in the run, but not afraid to let it go.
Yeah. And he kind of throws a pretty ball. Like some of those balls we talked about, it is Friday after the Thursday night Carolina-Tampa Bay NFL game. We talked about Cam Newton, and one thing he completely lacks, I feel like, is touch. And that kid throws the ball when he needs to. He can put touch on the ball.
Yeah, and just understand, true freshman. I mean, so we're talking about a kid, and he committed. I don't believe he graduated early. He was not an early commitment. He came in February, so my guess is at best he got the summer and then the fall camp. May have only had fall camp, which is, again, that's something very impressive to see a kid play with the poise he's played with. He had to bring back his team against Miami, so he's a kid that's played under a little bit of pressure. Actually, really, in both games he played under pressure, which is what I liked about him. So, I really feel like UNC is got the team to win this game. I feel like Mac Brown's got him on a good roll. Certainly what's interesting to me is UNC has kind of stepped with Virginia to the forefront of the Coastal. And I would say a little bit of lack of respect here because, Wake is really not going to compete for the Atlantic, certainly because of Clemson, but also there's a mishmash of teams in there that could beat them, including Boston College and NC State. Yet this is still basically considered an even matchup on a neutral site. So I'm going to watch it. I'm going to like it. I think it's going to be a fun offensive game.
What time's the game at?
That is, I believe, a 7 or a 7:30 game. It's an early game.
Okay.
Earlier game because it's obviously getting played on Friday night. There was no Thursday night football this week.
Mm-hmm.
I just think this is it's got the potential to be a fun one, whether you have a side or not. It's
it's
Friday night.
It is 6 o'clock.
6, okay.
It is a 6 o'clock game. I'm sure. Yep, ESPN. So it's real early.
Yeah. So
right.
This is one of those games that you can just have a little bit of fun with if you don't have a rooting interest. Again, not ranked opponents going head to head, but there's something on the line here, and particularly for UNC because they can separate themselves at top of the Coastal if they can. Virginia happens to fall at some point. So. that's a hell of an accomplishment for Mac Brown coming in, this 1 year removed with a freshman quarterback. So, I'm looking forward to it. I think UNC is going to take this one.
All right. I'm looking forward to it as well. It's a ACC matchup, and we'll have to. I think Wake's a team we have on the schedule this year, and North Carolina. Well, if they do well enough, we'll see them. So there's always interest in seeing what Clemson might potentially have to face at some point in the year. That being said, I think that North Carolina has something going, and I'd like to see the momentum. I can't really make a call on this game. I don't think. I think it's a toss-up. I think there are guys on the Wake Forest. They're very well coached. There are guys on that team like Surratt, Carney you mentioned, and I've mentioned before the receiver Sage Surratt that can make some plays. And I'm not sure that on the defensive side of the ball, North Carolina has the horses to stop them. We'll play a little bit of 6 degrees of separation type game for the listener to draw their own conclusion, I guess. So, first game of the year, Wake Forest was at home against Utah State, and the next part is really where the 6 degrees will come in. But they won that game 38-35. It was a bit of a shootout, but let me tell you something. We said at the beginning of the year, Utah State is a good Mountain West team. In fact, all the Mountain West teams thus far this year have been pretty darn good.
Yep.
Not bad at all. And, we talked about the quarterback for Utah State, Jordan Love, in the preseason. He's stud, man. This guy will find his way in the NFL. There was talk about potential dark horse Heisman. The only problem is you unfortunately really need to be on a team that's a contender, or at least close to that. You're not only are you in a non-Power 5 conference, but you're on a team that's probably not going to be a contender come year's end. But that's a good team, and Wake Forest, you don't know what you're going to get. Took care of business at home. Move on to the next week, and they take on Rice, which is where my 6 degrees of separation comes in, because week prior, Rice played Army. Army eked one out, which was somewhat surprising, 14-7. Army last week goes and plays Michigan at the Big House and almost wins that game.
Yep.
Wake Forest plays Rice last week, and, it was 41-21. So, they let Rice score some points, but, man, they beat them up, it seems like, way more than Army did, who almost beat Michigan.
Yeah.
So, again, draw your own conclusions from that. Make your own take the observations I've given you, and you can talk what you want. But I say all that to say is I said it when we talked about the intro on this matchup. North Carolina can't go in here and take Wake Forest lightly, and they're right now riding high.
Yep.
And I love the coach, and I hope him the best, but he's riding high.
Yep.
I know he's a disciplined guy, and I'm sure he knows how to keep these guys focused. But listen, man, he's riding high a little bit. Believe you me. So I don't know. It's a toss-up. I think it's going to be a very close game, and it would not surprise me in the least for Wake Forest to win this game.
All right. Well, we're going to have to watch and see. Again, that's a matchup that, like I said, we both think it's going to be a fun game. Another game on the slate tonight, we're not going to spend any time on this, but Kansas goes to Boston College. Kansas coming off a home loss to Coastal Carolina was not pretty.
Hold on. Wait a minute. Back up.
Okay.
Before we leave that, was I incorrect when I said North Carolina was going to Wake? It's the other way around.
No, they're going to Wake.
Oh, what's this?
Home and away. So,
well, that says away.
Oh, I did it backwards then.
Okay, so you confused me. I figured. All right, sorry, folks. I was right. Originally. I just want to make sure I don't sound like a moron. Yes, so UNC is going to Wake.
Technical difficulties.
All right, sorry. Fast forward, pick up where you left
All
off.
right. So again, I just mentioned Boston
The
College.
Cougs.
We think Boston College will roll. Kansas starting off rough. It's so we're gonna move on, but that's got ACC implications.
Yeah, and I hate that Les, lost last week to a subpar opponent, but I like Les Miles, but it's going to take a minute.
Yeah. So the big game, and this might be the best game of the whole weekend potentially, is the Washington State Cougs.
The Cougs, go Cougs!
Heading to Houston. In this game, Washington State is favored. They are a ranked team.
They're ranked 20 right now.
Yep. And Houston coming off, we talked about the game that they played against Oklahoma. And
Oklahoma.
What I saw was, and I was very high on King, their quarterback, also their running back Carr. I was expecting it to go the other way and be a close game early on and then have Oklahoma separate. Oklahoma got out big, but then Houston came back and played them, pretty much toe-to-toe from halfway through the second quarter on. So this is a game that's going to feature offense, man. You better have your eyes focused and not go away for the commercial breaks, because when this thing gets going, I think this is going to be pretty high scoring. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Certainly your favorite and a guy like
scientist.
Yeah, Mike Leach, definitely very creative. Does Dana Holgorsen? It seemed like Holgorsen struggled early on in the game to kind of get a foothold in the play calling, but turned it on, as I said, later on in the game. So this could be, an offensive explosion. A lot of athletes out there, a lot of guys running free. The over on this is 72.5, and I think it'll be every bit of that. Like, I just think this is going to go. It's going to go back and forth for a while. 72.5. So I think this is another one that is going to be a lot of fun. It's a 9:15 start for the East Coast, so you're going to have to stay up to watch it, and I think it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, this is you said it. I love the mad scientist. I love Mike Leach. But I did really, I think the world got to know De'Aaron King, and if they didn't, then from watching it, then they got it from our podcast. Right, Dave? Yeah. Here's an interesting note. Dana Holgorsen was a member of the Texas Tech coaching staff from 2000 to 2007. And who was the head coach during a span of time there?
I'm going to go Mike Leach.
Ding, 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 ding. What does he win, folks? So there is a little bit of tie here. You got the mentor and the protege going head to head. And I love that. I think that, I think Washington State sitting right now at 20 in the polls after what they did last year, and maybe it's because of that part of the Pac-12 that they're in had a lot of, at least at the beginning of the year, teams that were expected to do a lot, so they didn't start. I think that's a perfect place for them. Flying under the radar, listen, they didn't play anybody the first two games of the year. But when you play scrubs, in today's college football, you destroy them. And so 58-7 against New Mexico State and 59-17 against Northern Colorado, they destroyed them. Okay?
Yep.
So I don't think, I think the 20 ranking is way, way low for them. I don't want to say slap in the face. Certainly Mike Leach isn't the guy that'll take any of that to heart. But I think it's the perfect spot for them because if they can stay under the radar as we approach the first college football playoff ranking week, and they're still undefeated and taking care of business. I mean, they're going to obviously climb, but I think it's great for them, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I certainly could see where there's two things at play against them in the rankings. That's the West Coast bias, but also the blue blood bias. Which is okay, because again, at the end of the year, if you're winning and you're in a Power 5 conference, eventually you're going to get the notice, and they've got Washington State's got some interesting games on their schedule.
Yeah,
for
I
the
mean,
year.
look, they've got Utah, and obviously they were a kind of a darling early in the season for, to come out of there, the toughness. We've talked about that school. We love their head coach. And Utah's also undefeated, but they're ranked 11. And I mean, they beat Northern Illinois last week 35-17, probably better than Northern Colorado, but still. And then they beat BYU the first week 30-12, probably better than New Mexico State, but still they haven't had any big conference matchups or matchups against another Power 5 school. So, for them to be that just goes to show you in my mind that preseason rankings are total BS, okay? Because I don't see how there can be that much of a discrepancy between these two teams, especially since Washington State was the representative last year. Yeah. I think that of all the Pac-12 schools, I thought that at the beginning of the year, Oregon was a team to look out for. Unfortunately, they drew a tough matchup first game of the year. I thought they were going to win it. They didn't. It was a good game. They certainly didn't get destroyed, but now, at this point, with them having a loss, I think the best opportunity the Pac-12 has to get a team into the college football playoff might be
Washington State,
the Washington State Cougars.
Yep. I agree. So again, we spent a little bit of time on it because I got to looking down the schedule. These ones, I think, have kind of out of the gate have some potential to be a lot of fun. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the Saturday early games. I will say overall, the week as a whole, as we mentioned, is not one of the stronger weeks, at least on paper. But we had two early games that we'll take a look at. And probably the biggest one is going to be the Pitt Panthers heading to Penn State. Penn State is a 17.5-point favorite, 17-point favorite. And I got to tell you, so this is Penn State. I talked about them after week one, and they went out and absolutely smoked Idaho 79-0. And they look, to me, very good. Last week, they started off very slowly against the Buffalo team. But like what good teams do when they struggle,
what do they do
in a game? They come out, they set their game plan, and they get to it. And they ended up taking that game. I think it was 45-10, maybe. I gotta look that up off the top of my head. It was somewhere in the neighborhood. The
Penn State
game against Buffalo, but
it was 45-13.
So again, you got a Pitt team. Now Pitt comes in a little bit hobbled. They had some tough games early in the year, but it seemed like their offense was starting to figure it out a little bit more. This has definitely got a rivalry to it. It's got a lot of history.
I'm glad you said that. There is a little bit of a rivalry here.
And it's interesting is there's talk about this rivalry going away and them not playing each other for a long period of time. So this might be one of those last few times for them to get at each other. Again, only a couple of hours away from each other, in the state of Pennsylvania. I think it could be interesting for a little while, but I have to say, I'm bullish on Penn State. I believe it's them and Ohio State in the Big Ten East and Wisconsin out west. And I think, Penn State kind of has been given the afterthought. And there's all this Ohio State, Michigan, Harbaugh versus Ohio State talk. I got to tell you right now, Penn State might be the best team in the Big Ten. I think the great part is they got to play it. So we're going to determine that in the field. But I could see them, handling this game, even with the rivalry. Penn State ran the ball very well in their first game, didn't run it so well against Buffalo. But I'm a believer in this Penn State team. I think they're ranked a little bit low right now. But again, they haven't played heavy competition. So this is kind of the start as they roll into their Big Ten schedule, kind of going into a little bit better competition with Pitt.
Yeah. Look, Pat Narduzzi's a good coach. He makes a lot out of nothing, I feel like. You never hear about Pitt. You never heard of Pitt. Really wasn't on the radar for any reason 2 years ago when they beat Clemson in the regular season. And even then they got all the notoriety for a week, and then it was just back to being nobodies. I'm not I don't know if I want to say bullish on Penn State. I do think that you're right on point that it's them and Ohio State. And I actually, for the mere fact, I don't think Brian Day is a bad coach, but he is new at the head coaching gig. And, James Franklin was new at the head coaching gig, a decade ago down at Vandy. He's already been there, done that. And I think Day is still learning, and that's going to be a heavyweight matchup that Franklin has been in those as a head coach and Day hasn't. So I almost am leaning a little more on that side of the conference towards Penn State, I guess. Here's an interesting note that I found, though. Over the summer, a safety from Penn State, John Patrician, I guess is his name, is transferred to Pitt.
Yep. Yeah.
And there's been a little bit. I mean, again, no one hears a lot about Pitt, but behind the scenes, like you said, it is an in-state rivalry, and there's been some beefing back and forth between Franklin and Narduzzi in past years. And so apparently it rears its ugly head again with this guy transferring because Franklin said this week that the team had to change all their hand signals on offense and defense when the safety transferred so that they didn't know what they were doing.
Hey, with the open transfer rules, with the way they are right now, this is going to happen a lot more, which is going to be a challenge for teams to do that.
If you don't think the kid transferring is going to help his team that he's now on, you are sorely mistaken.
Oh, he spent a little extra time in coach's office.
Oh, yeah.
Sure
so
that.
Tell me a little bit of something. I thought that was interesting. But, it's I don't think there's any ill will in this. I think both coaches – even though they can come off a little maybe abrasive at times, are really great character individuals and great character leaders for these young men.
Yep.
So by no means do I think there's some serious animosity here. I think it's just, they jest. It's a spirited spat back and forth inside the state. But that, like you said, not a lot of huge games on the docket. I hope Pitt hangs in there, and they're the blue collar type team, just like the city they're in, just like the pro teams in that city. So they can grind you, but what I don't want to see, which could I think very easily happen, is Penn State run away with it. And maybe not early, but maybe like you said last week, when they make adjustments, they might start to run away with it.
Yeah, and Penn State's got a good running attack, and remember, Pitt lost their 2 interior linemen, which is not a benefit for them.
Did you run down like the seasonal, like what we got thus far in the season for both teams? The way I see it is Penn State is averaging just under 205 rushing yards a game. Pitt's averaging 39.
Yeah. Now understand.
Passing yards 310 average for Penn State, 92.5 for Pitt. So that, that's why I say, they may hang in there a little bit, but if Penn State makes adjustments and starts to run away with it, it could happen.
Yeah, I mean, but granted, a lot of those stats, just to be aware, Penn State came at in the first game. If you look at Penn State stats,
good point.
Was significantly different. They had less than 100 yards rushing. But again, I like what they did to finish the game off. I think this game could be fun. It might be interesting for at least a little while. And I like it. I like a little jostling. I think it's smart on Franklin's part. He puts, it helps motivate a team that's a favorite, and that's, I think, a good strategy. So that's a game I definitely will be keeping an eye on in the early games on Saturday.
What other earlies we got Saturday?
Really, it was slim pickings, but one we went after more because it's kind of an odd matchup of teams from the Big 12 and from the SEC, where we got Kansas State heading to Mississippi State. Interestingly, on this one, Kansas State has played a couple of run over games, but they are a 7-point dog to Mississippi State, who, I got to be honest with you, out of the gate, I don't think have really looked that strong to me. Again, I have not been able to put my eyes to a lot of K-State so far this year, but I do look at the statistics, see some of the highlights. So this one, I'm interested to see. That just it was surprising to me to see that pick out there. So maybe those watching Kansas State a little better than I have know something I don't know, which would not, be out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
But it is, it's interesting. It is at Mississippi State, so they do have the home crowd there. That is a good thing for them. But that's one that's kind of an odd matchup, not one that I have seen in the past, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it's been some time since Kansas State has been relevant.
Yep.
Another Hall of Fame college football coach in Bill Snyder, there forever and a day. Maybe too long.
Hey, I'm trying to remember.
He's not there anymore.
Is it?
The head coach is Chris Kleiman.
But is this his first year or second year? Because Snyder was still there last year, and I can't remember if he was a third-time coach back or a two-timer. Snyder.
That's he was gone back.
Yeah,
and it was really when he left the first time, that was kind of the end of Kansas State's run.
Yeah.
At the end of his first, before he left, because when he was there during that whole tenure before that first departure, they were, for some time, solid. I mean, they put it, and there's
strong defense.
Little Darren Sproles is still playing in the NFL, man.
Yeah, running quarterbacks.
He came from Kansas State.
Yep. So there were some interesting guys, but we're gonna. That's that's a game that might have some interest. But
I think if anything, it would be it would be bad if Mississippi State loses, but for the rest of the country, that is tired of hearing about the SEC always being the best. They would like to see that happen, so that's kind of why we threw it out there.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know enough about Kansas State yet. Again, I mean, I can look at do research all day long, but they're just there's nothing that I can really point my finger to because I'm not knee deep in it. So, and they're not close. Okay, so that was early Saturday, like. Early? 12. So now we're going to the midday slate. I mean, there are a few others that we didn't touch on. Georgia plays Arkansas State. Have they played a game yet?
Who?
Georgia? Have they played like a team yet?
No. And there's been talk about their schedule overall. Just
look, I know Georgia fans listen, and you got Notre Dame coming. The big one's next week. I don't know that Notre Dame is the big one anymore. I think the pieces they lost to the NFL this past year really has changed the way that team is performing.
Yeah.
I hate to say it. You wouldn't think that. You do not necessarily think they're to the reload instead of rebuild like in Alabama or Clemson right now, but still it shouldn't be complete rebuild with Notre Dame, and it's something not right. But the Georgia fans in town seem to think it's a huge matchup. And then let's see, they have Tennessee after that, South Carolina, Kentucky. Oh, wow. And then they get a bye before they have Florida. Tough.
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't want to stay on that because that's a weak game. But after the LSU Texas performance, I said it on the recap from last week. I think LSU should be right at 2. I mean, if anything, 3. I don't. I know Alabama hasn't played anybody anyways either, but they like us will get the benefit of the doubt because quite frankly, they historically have shown it. They have the resume there. But Georgia, I think on a neutral field right now, LSU would whoop them. So, and I'm sorry, Georgia fans, but, you need to be honest with yourself. They're going to be a tough matchup. You're lucky they're not on your side.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's move on.
So
Saturday
speaking
midday.
of that, speaking of the midday, talking about Alabama travels to South Carolina.
Uh-huh.
We know we talked a little bit about South Carolina's troubles. This is a heavy favorite for Alabama, even on the road.
So what Alabama's giving 25.5
to South Carolina,
and it's a 62-point over/under. So that tells you that Alabama's going to score a ton, and South Carolina's not going to score.
Yeah, I mean, again, remember they are they're running with a backup quarterback. We've got conspiracy theories brought to you by Bill Mannis on that quarterback situation.
But is it a bad thing? I mean,
No,
they won last week. South Carolina won 72-10. Granted, it was Charleston Southern, but I said it at the beginning. When you're playing the scrubs, you dominate them.
Yep,
that's dominating.
Yep. So I mean, I will say this: if Alabama dominates this team, I mean, I'm not ready to pull Alabama out. It's not really benefit of the doubt. I think we are ultra critical of a team that wins all the time. It's just hard not to be because you're not comparing Alabama to the rest of the field. You're comparing Alabama to Alabamas of teams past, and sometimes that is an unfair. That's an unfair comparison, especially into week 2. I don't think Alabama's done anything to lose their spot. I do agree with you about LSU being right there with them, 110%.
That's going to be...
And I am juiced for that game.
I just hope it stays the course until then.
I don't want either one to stumble until then.
I want to make sure that for the most part, at least all their key pieces, quarterbacks, their top-notch receivers, running backs, that they all stay, healthy or healthy enough so that it is just... a clash of the Titans.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see if USC can attack the defense, particularly in the middle of the field. Obviously we, and Alabama's still dealing with the loss of Dylan Moses. It hasn't really shown up against their competition yet. As USC have enough to exploit some of that. Yeah,
they've adjusted.
Yeah,
they've brought guys on the back end down a little bit that are more experienced veterans to help with the play calling and the adjustments at the line of scrimmage, so that those linebackers understand it and can go quickly, and that they're starting to learn it as they go. So
yeah, so that, I mean, again, I'm expecting Alabama to get this thing done. Maybe a little bit of mild drama early on, going back and forth a little bit, but I think in the end Alabama rolls.
Yeah, I just want to see when they get my man Muschamp on the mic, whether it be before halftime, after the game, or all of the above, hopefully, because I would love it for somebody to say, what do you guys think about the fact that Alabama's giving you 25.5 at home?
I'll assure you of two things. When they get him on the mic, he will A, be sweating, and B, will have that white, dried spit at the corner of his mouth. That's all I can tell you
right now.
And there'll be, and actually, I'll give you a C. There will be some level of stuttering, and irritation. Certainly that's all I can tell you about that.
And a D, while he's doing it all, have a dumbfounded look on his face, and maybe even have his voice crack.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. Good defensive coordinator. I hate to trash him on that, but has struggled as a head coach.
Trash the hell out of him. I don't hate him. I really don't. It's just they're our enemy, and it's fun to poke.
Yep. So again, that's the expectation out of that game. Heading on, a game we thought may have a little bit more luster to it, but may not, is Stanford heading to UCF. UCF and their national championship claims and everything, they are winning big, but we know about their schedule and their opponents. Stanford, going to be without their quarterback again, Costello.
Davis Mills will get the start.
Yep. And so, a West Coast team coming across the East Coast. Good part is it's a midday game, so it's, a nooner for them. It's going to be hotter than Hades.
Mm-hmm.
So... whether that plays into it, we know that
David Shaw
has a well-coached team.
Those guys, obviously, they're smart. I don't think that'll be as much of a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than a touchdown spread, so the belief is that UCF is going to be able to run the offense, but they are going to play against, I think, a formidable defense. If Stanford can control the clock a little bit, it certainly could be a closer game, but it's a not a major task, but it's a strong statement if UCF can actually win that game again. When all the dust settles, I don't believe
UCF is giving the 8.5.
Yeah. So I just don't know. Stanford, if they would have been undefeated going to this game, they would have their starting quarterback. We probably have a little bit different take on this, and the value of this game would have been a little bit more to UCF. At this point, it doesn't really have that luster to it, I think, and. I don't know. I mean, I guess I see UCF winning in the conditions, and just the fact that Stanford, just watching them, even against Northwestern before the quarterbacks went out, they weren't moving the ball as much and the way that I'm used to seeing them move the ball. So, if they get a lead on them, it could be a challenge.
Yeah, man. Here's how I feel. It's the good guys versus the bad guys. I got to be honest, Not like I'm a huge Stanford fan. I think I've told you before. I have had the good fortune of being on that campus. My wife's cousin was like a professor's assistant there. He went there, and his wife as well, and they got married at Stanford. And Stanford and Palo Alto are amazing. The weather's great. It is gorgeous. It would be hard to go to school, but no, I mean Clemson was nice too. Beautiful in its own right. It's God's country.
That was a little intro from Jim Cantori.
Yeah. So yeah, that's right. Cantori's Stories by Bill Maher. I really just like Leach. I have like this place in my heart somewhere for David Shaw. I love him. Coach Swinney. He loves them. They have a good relationship. In fact, a lot of I think Coach's successes in the way we run our program are due to a relationship he has with Shaw, and I think the success we've had in recent years, Shaw is trying to emulate with him. But he always stays the course, and I really like David Shaw. He's great peoples. He is good at humaning people, and I like Stanford a lot in terms of a team, a program, all the time, because they're in the Pac-12, whether it's a conference that doesn't get the attention it deserves because of the late games, or because it's not the Southeast, because it's West Coast football, maybe a little more flashy. They're solid. They are a solid team. Defense and pound the rock. And on the other hand, you've got Danny White, AD over there at UCF, and done some creative things saying how they're the national champions. I told you, went to the game last year, and on the highway to Santa Clara to the stadium, they had taken out a billboard, UCF, about them being the national champs. It's good. It's smart, because people noticed it. But they're like the bad guys. People don't want to hear that. They're like, they're not the national. They don't play. They're not in a Power Five. This could be ugly. The game that Costello, the starter for Stanford, was in the first one against Northwestern. Granted, they won 17-7. Yes, that was the one he got banged up and knocked out. It was ugly win. It was ugly. It was not like Stanford dominated by any means. And then they go last week and take on USC with this other kid at quarterback, Davis Mills for Stanford, and then the Keaton Slovis kid, and it was a duel of these backup quarterbacks who Slovis won, and I think Mills did solid, but he didn't do anything. Like the Slovis kid was taking himself to another level, okay? Yeah. As opposed to Mills maybe being the game manager, the other kid was trying to win the game. And I don't know. And I think it's the good guys in Stanford going up against the bad guys in UCF. And though I would love Stanford to come out of this one with a win, I'm afraid that it could be real ugly. They're not. There's nothing about Stanford that tells me they have explosiveness, and that's all UCF really is. That's their game is try to hit big plays every drive. Run the ball, but at one point in the drive they're going to go for one. Yep. And if they start to hit on some of those, I don't know how Stanford can keep up, because certainly with this quarterback, but not just that, the talent on the field, it's good talent, but I don't see any of that talent being explosive, game changer type guy. We've spent a little while, but it is one of the better matchups. We'll have to see. I hope for my man David Shaw, they come out of there, maybe with a squeak of victory out, but we'll see. Stanford obviously was ranked in the preseason, I believed, in the top 25, and they're not now, and UCF's at 17. I think at the beginning of the year, were they ranked? I don't know if they were. I think they might have just been on that. Maybe they were like 25.
Stanford.
Yeah, no, UCF.
I believe they were ranked.
Were they?
Yeah.
Okay. Either which way.
Stanford was 25 going into the year.
Concern for Stanford. Concern on this one, but it should be interesting. It should be interesting. Hopefully it'll stay competitive.
Yeah, the next game that we're going to look at is Arizona State heading out to Michigan State. Michigan State has not been flashy, but has been very solid in their wins so far this year.
It's
Arizona
like they are always when
yeah,
they're good.
Yeah, Arizona State, not so much. Last week they won 19-7 against. I just had it in my head, and I am sorry, but
It was against Sacramento.
Sacramento State. Yeah, I knew it was. It was a other thought kind of game. Things not going well for Herm down there at Arizona State. I look for Michigan to handle.
Are we overreacting though?
Yeah.
I mean, they are 2-0, and they haven't played anybody, but
Yeah, not. And again, this is the problem with these when you schedule these types of games. They are not, when you're paying the money for these teams to come play you, they are not to your advantage as a football team. So your performance, again, if you don't dominate, then it's
I mean, Michigan State beat Western Michigan 51-17 last week. First week 28-7 over Tulsa. So I mean, they might not be too bad of a task for Arizona State.
Yeah, I mean it's more than a 2-touchdown spread on this one. It's
for
Michigan State. Yeah. So it's this game is really more about name than matchup.
Yeah. Yes.
Don't ever want to say that it can't be a competitive game, but the trends right now are not in favor of Arizona State. Let me say it that way. I will say this, it does matter in the Big Ten. The Big Ten can get a little smashed up because we're going to talk about the next matchup, which is kind of in line with that, and that is Iowa heading to Iowa State. Interestingly, Iowa had their struggles with Northern Iowa that we talked about.
Iowa State.
Iowa State had their trouble with Northern Iowa.
Yes.
A lot of Iowas in there.
There is.
Iowa is a ranked team.
Iowa know you. Iowa know me.
Iowa, I believe, is 19, I think is what they are.
Iowa's 19, my friend.
Yeah, and they're only, they are going on the road, but Iowa's only given 2 points in this game, which was kind of surprising to me. So there's not a lot of love for Iowa is what I take out of that, because I don't see a national love of Iowa State and what they did. I think they've certainly suffered from losing their back, David Montgomery, and his ability to control that offense. So this one's kind of a strange one to me that Iowa's really not getting a whole lot of love. Certainly not from our buddies out west in Vegas, that's for sure.
Well, here's the thing. Look, Iowa State didn't perform well against Northern Iowa, but it was the first game of the year.
Yep.
There's going to be some guys on both squads that have played with each other, against each other in high school. They know each other. It might not be like a rivalry like Iowa State, but there's probably inside that state some folks that see a little bit of rivalry with Northern Iowa State. Here's the other thing. Iowa State had a bye week last week.
Yeah, that helps.
So, and I was, I think I was really good, but I've said it before. I was even better at Kinnick when they're at home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is true.
So they're going to Iowa State. Everybody's going to be amped. I think that Iowa State's defense is better than we think. I just don't think the first game was indicative of what we may see, and I think that's why it's closer. I think the Iowa State defense is a little bit better than folks are giving them credit for, and obviously with the performance against Northern Iowa, to let them take them to overtime and put up a total of 26 points altogether throughout the game on them, it's like, hell yeah, well, that doesn't show me. But I really do think that Iowa State's defense is a little better than folks think, and that's why I think the line's closer. The kid at quarterback for Iowa State, what the heck? Why am I drawing a blank, people? Dave will pull it up for me, but he was, I think he was one of the incoming freshmen that they, oh no, I'm sorry. Brock Purdy. I was thinking of Iowa State, Brock Purdy. I think Brock gets right this week. I think that he took his lumps in the first week. I actually think that there was, with the fact that David Montgomery left that program and went on to the Chicago Bears, I feel like there was I mean, Purdy threw it 41 times, but I'm looking at it. It looks like it was pretty balanced with the run. 14, 13, 27, 38, 39, 43. So it was that. My point is this: losing a guy like Montgomery and having a guy at quarterback like Purdy, I'm surprised they didn't maybe go a little like 60-40 in favor of the pass to let him get it done. And now maybe it was first game of the year. They're just kind of getting their bearings straight, for the most part, different backfield. So trying to figure out what they had. But I think this is a week he could get back on point. He'll be amped up for this game. Both programs, the fans, everybody's going to be jacked for this game. When it's rivalry weekend in football for most of college football around Thanksgiving, these guys have it right at the beginning of the year. And keep in mind, Iowa State was made great progress last year, but they had this game early in the year, just like they do this year at Kinnick, and lost 25-3. Okay, and Iowa wasn't great throughout the rest. What I'm saying there is that after that game, it seemed like Iowa's chart line on its chart, its arrow started pointing down, and Iowa State started pointing up.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the first game of the year with Northern Iowa, then it's just like what? So that's that's why I think it's much closer on the line than we think, because Iowa, they haven't played many folks yet this year. They just, from what I've seen, have looked pretty dominant in what they've done. So there you have it. Where are we going? We're going to bounce to the late games.
Let's talk about the evenings games. Starting out the year, we would have thought some of these matchups would be a little bit more intriguing, I think more had hoped some of these matchups would be a little bit more intriguing. But they're still worth looking at. There is some interest and some implications for these games. We'll lead off with Florida heading to Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And for those that weren't in Kentucky or Florida fans last year, Kentucky went into Gainesville and left with smiles.
That they did, sir.
Was not a good performance for Florida. So Florida's going to look to rebound. Unfortunately, Kentucky, their starting quarterback, Wilson, has gone down and will not be playing in this game, which, given that Florida's going to be pretty amped up.
We talked about this. Who's getting, because, we had our podcast about the reality football shows, and one of them we touched on was QB1, and that was the one showing the high school quarterback trio.
Yep.
And one of the kids this year was the Nick Scalzo kid down in Miami, and he went to Kentucky. But we if you remember, he tore his ACL at the end of the season. They said it was a clean tear, so that it was only going to be a 4-month recovery. So that's at the end. He just enrolled in Kentucky this year, so is he going to be the guy?
No, it's going to be their backup, Sawyer Smith. He came in the middle of the game after Wilson went down.
Okay.
Went 5-9 for 76 yards and 2 touchdowns against Eastern Michigan. This team is they're dangerous. They're pretty well coached. Remember one of the Stoops brothers, former defensive coordinator for Florida State, Mark Stoops. Has done a pretty nice job recruiting and really an afterthought in the SEC West for several years. East for several years. And is and this is the type of team, and last year being the example, they're a schedule wrecker. They are. They can show up and kind of be that team where you're like, God, how did that happen? UF, again, Tony has been hurt. They lost another guy, and I'm blanking on the name that they lost offensively. So they've got some offense there that has got some challenges. You've got a quarterback who is very controversial in the sense of, is he on his way to becoming the quarterback they had hoped, or is this guy really kind of just a shadow of what people thought he was going to be? And Felipe Franks, he's certainly done some talking. he goes from, being very animated and somewhat arrogant on the sidelines against Miami. And then when he gets the pushback, then he turns into like, well, I'm not listening to any of it, but yet he clearly reacts to it. So, is he going to be settled and balanced and focused in this game? Florida definitely has the defense, especially the pass rush and the front seven that can do a lot of damage, especially against a younger, quarterback not expecting to be playing in this game. Florida certainly got revenge on their mind, and I would not be shocked to see him get it done. I think it's going to be a more interesting game than
You would not be shocked to see who?
Florida get it. Florida get it done, but I may be not shocked to see Kentucky really make a run at this. I don't know that this is going to be the runaway that they had hoped for. I think in order for them to do that, Florida's got to run the ball really well and get Franks into comfortable passing situations. I've just seen this guy enough in Felipe Franks that if you rattle him,
he's finished.
Yeah, it doesn't bring out the best in him.
Yeah, he doesn't take it well.
And he's a defensive-minded. Stoops is a defensive-minded coach. So this one could be a little bit more interesting. Again, obviously Florida's not. I would hope they would not take them lightly. They certainly have the advantage in personnel, but things can happen, and certainly last year showed that. And and again, it's in Kentucky. What say you? Anything to add to that?
Yes. I'm not going to be on there. I always say I'm not going to take too and then I ramble on. I think Kentucky's winning the game. That's what I got to say. I think Kentucky's look, the stud DN Josh Allen that was drafted in the NFL, I think he'll be good in the NFL. But don't get it twisted. He was not the only guy on that defense that was talked very highly of, especially for a Kentucky defense. T.J. Carter, number 90, senior, D-end, stud, okay? Josh Pascal, their D-end / linebacker, number 4, he's a redshirt sophomore, stud, okay? Cash Daniel, middle linebacker, senior, good player. Jordan Griffin, strong safety, senior, good player. I mean, they've got some good players on that defense. And you said it. You rattle that kid and he's done. And Stoops comes from a great legacy of great-minded coaches, and we'll know that, and we'll go in there and cause problems. I think Felipe Franks is going to look like we thought he did. And he's going to poop himself. And I think Kentucky's going to win the game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but I think Kentucky's going to win the game. And I think they have a statement to make. I think that the whole world, everybody's saying the same thing that you led off with, kind of like Benny Snell's gone and Allen's gone. And so a lot of people are like, oh, ho-hum with Kentucky. That was the one-hit wonder last year with the great run that they made. They just had some good players. I think they're going to try to make a statement. And I think it's bad for the SEC East. Good for Kentucky, and I'd be happy for them. But I think it's bad for the SEC East because this is just going to show where is Florida ranked now? 9? Yeah. They should,
right.
And if Kentucky wins, they should fall out of the rankings completely because then they are who we thought they were.
Okay, interesting. All right, so we're going to move on to the next game, which is a night game played in Charlottesville with Florida State heads to UVA. The hope in this game going into the year was that this game had a lot more meaning than it has right now. I think it still has meaning, but in a very different context. UVA, as we mentioned when we were talking about UNC, is probably right now the front runner for the Coastal with North Carolina right there with them. They got a ultra talented passer in Perkins from a standpoint of being able to run the ball, definite dual threat. Smart kid, and kind of suits an offense that they run there, as well as they've got some good players on defense. They're, what's his name?
Bryce Hall.
Bryce Hall, thank you. is their corner. It's very strong, and we've got an FSU team that continues to limp along on both legs. They're limping. To me, the story on this is, and I believe UVA is going to win this game and win it, unfortunately, handily for me. But FSU is a rudderless ship right now. This is the big concern is the fact that
Rudderless.
It is really what's going on to me with their defense. I think their offense still has a lot of holes, but the defense has been just outplayed. Poor performance against Louisiana Monroe that came down to a missed extra point in order to secure their first win of the season. UVA is on a different level than that team. It's going to be very hard for them to handle the play. There's a lot of talk that they've changed some of their depth chart. Freshmen are starting to see playing time. And in fact, Florida State brought in former defensive coordinator for Oregon when Taggart was there, Jim Leavitt, which is, to me, it's a good person to have in there. But my question is the timing of this smells a lot like desperation. To me, I'm not sure that Willie Taggart, no matter what happens this year, will get fired this year. He has
you said that.
He has a tremendous buyout. His buyout is bigger, almost as big as Scott Frost and Chip Kelly's combined. So kudos to his agent for swinging that deal. But that being said, I do believe this game is going to decide whether he has a long-term future at Florida State. We just can't afford to go backwards. And sadly, I think, a loss here sets this program back because I don't believe he'll get fired probably multiple years because you're going to have a lame duck coach next year and you're going to hurt your recruiting. It's time it was time last year for Taggart to put up or shut up. I think this is a game where it's just really he's at the wall for his long-term life at Florida State. I don't see him getting it done. They look lost in so many areas. We can hope that, like last week, that a guy like Cam Akers is able to take over the game, but he touched the ball entirely too much in that game. For my liking, he had, I think, 31 on the ground and like another 6 or 7 in the air. So he was touching the ball close to 40 times, which is not
Who's
good.
that?
Cam Akers for Florida State. So, I guess, this game, to me, I don't even know that it's going to be close at really after the first quarter or so. I just don't have a lot of faith in this FSU team. Like I said, I'm really shocked at the lack of direction. I understood last year they needed to get rid of some people. They had issues, with their grades and where they said they couldn't get rid of players. Well, this year, apparently that's not holding them back. And anything from the dehydration, the play calling, this, that, it's always an excuse. And I think UVA's not going to be willing to pander to any of their excuses. They're just going to put the wood down.
Pander.
So, sadly, that's my take on the game. I don't know if you have any additional views on it.
I mean, look, here's the thing. For the conference as a whole, the ACC, I think Virginia needs to win. I don't think they need to beat the crud out of you guys. That's not going to be good. Keep in mind, Virginia went to Pitt last week and won the game 30-14, but it wasn't like a blowout. And I think what a lot of, at least in my mind, Bryce Perkins, the Virginia quarterback, he's a dual threat guy, and you kind of expect them to be explosive and maybe put up more points. Statistically, the first 2 weeks, last week and the week prior when they played they played William and Mary. Yeah, that was the week prior. Was that right? No, I'm sorry. They played them, William and Mary, last week. The first game of the year was the week prior. They played Pitt. But both games, Perkins didn't go over 200 yards. In both games, he only threw 2 touchdowns. The one against William, he didn't have any picks in the first one. The second one against William and Mary, he actually had 2 picks. Mm-hmm. And I watched some of that game, and he's not a great passer of the ball, my friend. He's not that great. Here's your problem. He is a runner because that's where his statistics go up. in both games. The one against Pitt, the first one, he ran the ball 18 times for only 44 yards, but he did have a heavy workload, so obviously he's not afraid to tuck it and run it, and he's got moves. Last week he went 7 for 68 yards and a touchdown, and herein lies the problem. You guys, when people are just running the ball up the middle with backs, there's a mishmash. We've said it before. When we've watched them, mishmash of people, and all of a sudden that back squirts out the back end of that mishmash of people, and he might not be going the distance, but he's picking up close to 5+ yards a clip, if not breaking some. Yeah. And a lot of that in my mind is tackling. The guys they're bad tackling,
and not even just that, bad discipline.
You see where I'm going with this. If you're undisciplined against a dual threat guy like this kid, more like a Lamar Jackson type kid, you're not disciplined and you don't tackle well, that's ugly. Yeah. And that's my biggest concern. I don't think their defense is anything spectacular. I mean, again, William and Mary put 17 on them, and Pitt did put 14 on them. I mean, I think you're better than William and Mary, buddy.
Well, I'll admit.
So my point is this:
but
I want to see some of the game. It is on right around the same time we play, so I'm only going to probably catch bits or try to have it, on another screen. But I'd like to see you guys put up a good fight. I think Virginia will end up winning the game, and I think again for the conference, I think they need to win the game. I just don't want to see a slaughter. So
I think it is what it is. Like he's coaching for his life, that's for sure. So we'll move on, as you mentioned, to your game. The Clemson Tigers heading to Syracuse. Starting the year, if I was him and I were talking, and I felt like this is probably, if there's a danger game potential, which I say that loosely. I didn't really feel like it was a super danger game.
Yeah, I mean,
I said the challenge was Clemson had to come out of Texas A&M healthy.
We did.
I expected a lot more out of Syracuse. It went the other way. Clemson not only is healthy, dominated the game against Texas A&M. Syracuse, on the other hand, their quarterback is a major concern in this. The hope was DeVito was able to run that offense a lot better. They got handled by Maryland.
Yeah. And now, I think Maryland, first of all, they're very well coached, and I think they're a better team than a lot of folks are giving them credit for.
I agree, but they got handled.
But they did get handled.
And so, I will say this. You were very, very high on Clemson for good reason last week. The thing that's scary to me, just kind of looking at Clemson through a little less biased eyes, doesn't mean yours are incorrect, but just a little less biased. I still don't think Clemson has put together the level of game that they can, and that should scare the hell out of people.
No,
I think they can be even better than what they showed. They can be more balanced. Their defense can be more ferocious. They just don't have to be, because they can handle opponents so quickly. So I look for this to get out of hand early. I think Clemson's motivated. I think they've got this championship attitude about them. It's I guess more so than an arrogance. It's just it's time to go to work, and it's business. And and so I see this game again not living up to any sort of hope for hype. I think Clemson's just that good.
Yeah, well, man, you know me, and I am a homer, and on the mic, it may sound like, I am just totally not objective, but I really do try to be, because you know me. In all the years you've known me, even the past several years when we've been good, there is, in my head as a fan, we don't get head over heels. We don't try to get too big in our britches. Yeah, we're really good, but we always think, if you've been a fan as long as I do, you always think, man, we understand this game. And I said it earlier in the cast, that you can lose any given week. And we always have a tough game, whether win or lose, that throughout the year, or a couple that, we potentially could. You hit the nail on the head, though, bro. I mean, we haven't put it all together like we did in the college football playoff. But I think I hit it in our recap from week 2. I saw this, what I have seen these first 2 weeks is what I need to slap myself in the face because it's what I see every year. We build and we hit different phases, and that's the way coach wants it. If there's a week that Trevor's off his game, like it was week 1 against Tech, the running game is kicking butt, just like it did. If the running game's not doing its thing, and it did actually okay, Lynn J. Dixon actually seemed to be more successful, and he's extremely talented, y'all. If you don't know, I mean, the number 23, our backup to Etienne, is very, very good. But Etienne, it's not like he looked horrible. It was just that was a day where Trevor took care of business because the rushing game was. They have a really good rush team in Texas A&M. That's one of the reasons why. So we took what they gave us, and that's what we do a lot. And you will see throughout the year a lot. You may see it against Syracuse. Something may not be. It may not work on both sides of the ball. But when we hit November, that is championship phase, is what Coach calls it, and that's when we have to put it all together.
Yep.
And look, it's offensive side. We know what we have there. I mean, and all the talk is now they lost all those dudes to the NFL on the defense, and like, what in the world? Like, how can you do that? Well, a lot of it, folks, it's character. I mean, we develop guys. Just because a kid's a 5-star out of high school, if you don't have the right people developing him, he could turn into mush. And we're really good at that. And it's one of the things I love about our school and the program and our team and where we're at right now. And from where we came from when I was a student there back in the 90s. I mean, it's great. And I love it. I don't think this is... I heard Coach on ESPNU yesterday on the afternoon show off campus with Mark Packer. He does it every week. He brings Dabo on, and Dabo's he's great, dude. He gave all the credit in the world to Dino Babers, rightfully so. He said, "I love that guy. He's a great coach. We're good friends. We used to not really know each other." He's like, "But we respect each other's game." And Babers is a great coach. We've talked about that at length before too. And how he's made a lot out of less talent. It's going to be hard with DeVito. He's just not getting to. He's going to have to all of a sudden become like overnight something clicks. And because that's really, Dungy was the one for them that really, the year we lost up there in the Carrier Dome, and last year where they gave us to it. Now, I said this before too. After both games last year, Texas A&M and Syracuse, even though we won both, those were, that was Trevor's, probably his worst performance at A&M, and then he got knocked out of the game, which I was sitting right in front of where it happened with the fam when Syracuse came to Death Valley. So don't get it twisted. Trevor and the entire team, a lot of them who were up there 2 years ago when we lost at the Carrier Dome, have circled this one. They did it. Trevor circled this after he got, probably when he was on the sideline watching Chase Price and at the end bring us back in that game. Made a little note. Can't let this happen next year. So the line is 27.5. I'll tell you, the line was 17.5, 18 for the game against A&M, and I was like, whoa. And with that last-minute mercy touchdown for A&M, they covered. But I thought the line was out of control, but we had it the whole game. Vegas is scary, folks. So 27.5, yeah. I'm not going to go against that this time. And I'm trying to say all this is like I walked away from A&M, and I saw the Trevor that I saw at the national championship. Maybe not all the whole team, but he was back on track. Trust me, he was. And after the game, I think I even said to you and to all my Clemson boys, I go, I don't know who's going to stop us until we get to the playoff. I don't know who's going to even be able to touch us. I mean, good. We got to stay healthy always, but that sounds so arrogant, and that's not who I am. I'm more of the worst case scenario type of guy, especially when it comes to my team. I started this conversation say we don't get too big for our britches, but dude, I mean, and again, the defense, Venables is the best. He's the best. He's the best DC in college football, and it didn't matter. And look, that's a tough match. Jimbo knows us. It's a battle. They said it at the beginning of the cast. Jimbo Fisher versus Brent Venables, and it was great. We looked so good. So yeah, 27.5. Why not?
Yeah, remember those comments about staying objective. Well, we're going to move on to the next
Sorry.
game.
Maybe I should say that we're going to only win by 3. Look,
No.
This is usually a close game, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's close. That's not an easy place to play, man. And it's sold out from what I understand.
No, I mean, I agree with you.
There will be you know what I'm interested in seeing? Because our buddy Dan Sipp went to the game because he's from Buffalo when it was at the Carrier Dome. He went home for a long weekend and went to the game, and he said that it was crazy, man. A lot of Syracuse people. We travel well. I wouldn't be surprised just for the mere fact that we don't want to be our team to be affected by it being all Syracuse. If it says it's sold out, that if we have a huge showing. Anyways, move on. I'm excited. We are game day on Saturday.
So we're going to move on to the next game. And I put this one out there just more for interest to see how it plays. But Hawaii is playing, going to Washington. And, certainly not a oh my God matchup, but I do want to see how Washington reacts to that loss.
Yep.
One thing interesting about Hawaii, and we've talked about it early, when we were talking about the first week.
They're undefeated right now.
They can throw up some points. So,
Is the hippie guy still a quarterback?
I think so. So, but if you want to see how Jacob Eason reacts to what's a pretty poor loss last week, and if Hawaii, if they come out flat and they don't come out angry, is it the type of offense that could kind of get some points on them early and then all of a sudden start to, kind of get a defeatist attitude within Washington? I mean, Washington is clearly the superior talent and should be able to go out there and just take out all their frustrations. So the question for me is, will they? And so that's kind of why I put that game on there, just to see what kind of reaction Washington has. Now, if they don't react well, it's not a good sign for the Pac-12, to be another one of those knocks that they've kind of been taking. So, we got to see what they come to bear on this one.
Yeah, I won't spend too much on it either, but Jacob Eason is clearly he even going there. What was the kid's name from last year that was their quarterback that went to the NFL? Do we remember? God, it's Jake Browning. This Eason is clearly not Browning, and I can't remember if Browning was a high recruit at a high school, but Eason was like the number one quarterback when he came out.
Yeah.
And we've talked about him. I don't think he's a student of the game, and that's causing problems. On the flip side, it does look like that hippie guy, Cole McDonald, the quarterback for Hawaii. Dude, man, in that first game against Arizona, he did throw 4 picks, but he went 29 of 41 for 378 and 4 TDs. And then last week, they play Oregon State, and he only throws 1 pick, and he went 30 of 52 for 421 and 4 TDs. Woo! That guy, those are some... Dude's got 8 TDs in 2 games, man. That's pretty freaking good. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. And I can't imagine going, even though they are not as far as East Coast, traveling over to Hawaii like that's easy for Washington. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. All right. So who we got next? It looks like a little Big 12, Big 10.
Yeah, TCU travels to Purdue. I'm not saying there's a lot of excitement for this game, but kind of like the KSU Mississippi State matchup is just kind of an odd pairing against two Power Fives. TCU's past history of strong defense. Purdue put up some big offensive numbers last week. Your quarterback, I think, went for 500 yards in that game. So,
And what's the kid, the receiver? He got back into form last week.
yeah, so
What's his name?
this one could have a little bit of back and forth. I don't think it's going to get the press, and maybe not number one on your dial, not on your jump back game, but just something to keep an eye on. And these are kind of the games that start to shape people's records at the end of the year. And then so when they get into a little bit more heated, contests within their conference, this is kind of one where, you try to draw some comparisons. I don't really have a whole lot to say about this game myself. Purdue is getting 2.5 at home. It's kind of more offense versus defense.
That's
at
exactly
least historically.
what it is. So the Brom in the offensive mindset, and then you've got Gary Patterson at TCU, and he's defensive guy. So one of them's going to have to give.
Yep.
One of them's going to have to give.
So there's your storyline. The next game we moved into, and this is, again, one of those let's see how they react type games. You've got Northern Illinois heading to Nebraska, take on Scott Frost and that team that
Huskies
that suffered a crippling loss last week. They have not started out the year well.
We talked about hot seat stuff in the recap. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and
I think that
Northern Illinois has had teams that have given teams fits.
And
over
we
the
just
years.
talked about it. They played. I think both the games they've played already this year have been decent competition. So they're going in. Already seen some tougher opponents. So. It's not like they're going to walk in and be like, oh my goodness, it's Nebraska.
Yep.
But this is one Nebraska has to have. I mean, and convincingly, I think, for his job.
Yeah,
I hate to say that, but
things are getting dicey, and in the last podcast I talk about recapping week 2 is that year of coaching, you've got a lot of troubled souls on that, between Scott Frost, Chip Kelly, Willie Taggart. The list was long. I mean, really, your only guys in the top 10 of the coaches that got hired.
I think Brian Kelly could.
Yeah, he wasn't hired in that year, but
just because. Yeah, but I mean, like Notre Dame's expectations are to be in the college football playoff every year and to have a title here and there. That's their expectations. That's their fan base's expectations. That's their program, their athletic department, the whole school. That's what they expect. And I think, again, talking about which way it is, the arrow pointing, Brian Kelly's, success here at Notre Dame. And what I'm seeing, certainly starting this year, I think that arrow is starting to point down, and I don't think Notre Dame will wait very long if it doesn't get to the point where they're back in. If they're not in the college football playoff, which I don't think they will be this year, they're going to already start looking. So,
little sidewinding over to Notre Dame, but just, again, we want to see how does Nebraska react, and against an opponent that, Northern Illinois, God, if I keep doing that again, Northern Illinois has not been afraid to schedule big opponents. They've played Florida State, I can certainly remember, and they gave us more than we wanted to deal with. And they'll play anybody. So Nebraska's in trouble, and they've not only been punched in the mouth, they've been knocked to the canvas. And the question is, can they get up and start to right this ship?
Yeah, we just talked about Michigan State. That's who Northern Illinois played last week. Yep. So I mean, and they've played tough teams. They'll be calloused coming in.
Yep. Yeah. And so moving on to the next game, this is really more in name only. Oklahoma is going to travel to UCLA, and again, talking about a coach in trouble, and we're talking about Chip Kelly. UCLA has got nothing for me. In my mind, this game is all about padding a Heisman run for Mr. Jalen Hurts. I I see nothing that makes me go any other way than that. I don't care that UCLA's at
They
home.
don't have talent.
Yep.
That's the problem. And I listen to a lot. That's all I listen to is football talk on the radio. So there's a lot of talk about the scrutiny since he's been there. Since he got there, Chip Kelly got to UCLA on his recruiting. That he was only taking he was going through these players with a fine-tooth comb, and they were talking about that's great, but and that's the way you want it to be, and it should be. But unfortunately, in this day and age of recruiting and social media and the way these kids want to get offered early, because that was the whole discussion. Like, he wouldn't offer kids early. He'd wait to the end and they make the offer and say, it took a while, but we wanted to make sure we do all our due diligence. And then, but that kid remembers Oklahoma coming to him and offering him when he was a freshman instead of at the end of his junior year. And it's like, sorry, man, you're too late. So in this day and age of recruiting, that's tough. And, they just don't have the players. And the line is, the over-under is 72.5. Is that it? And it's 23.5. Oklahoma's giving to UCLA, and it's at UCLA. Man, Oklahoma should just play its starters in the first half and then go hang out in Hollywood the second half and let the backups come in.
Yeah, and the scary part for
ugly.
Chip Kelly is he had the.
I like UCLA too. I've said it before. Yeah. Our producer John is a political science grad from there, and I've been there, and I've been to his grade. It's beautiful, and I like UCLA.
Yeah, I think the hard part for UCLA and Chip Kelly, and where his argument really dies, is when he came in, he really had an advantage. USC was in down years, and that was his chance to really take that mantle away from them and to get into the recruiting game. And clearly, not only is he missing the recruiting, the coaching, the games do not look good. They do not look like a sound, disciplined team. And like I said, I think this is Jalen Hurts padding his stats.
Yep. So go on to, it looks like you have one more to note on here, and then I'll run through after that just a couple other of the matchups, just rattle off who's got who.
Sure. The last one, and this one's probably just an offensive, fun house, and that's Texas Tech.
It's going to be crazy.
Going to Arizona. It's a close spread on this game, but the over on this one is 77, and that might be light.
I know. I was just going to say, we don't really we don't really bring up the spreads, and we certainly don't make predictions on the spreads or the over-unders for college. We'll do it on the NFL cast. 77 over under.
I'm going over.
Should we get online on one of these like online Vegas sites and put our money where our mouth is?
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling.
I think that score could easily cross 100. Yeah, I think it easily could go over 100 total.
Yep.
Woo! I think we might need to look into that.
It might cover 77 in the first half.
Just throw a Benjamin on it, see what happens. All right, so that's all we want to talk about that. Other than that, I just wanted to kind of see if take a look at this for some of the top teams that are out there that we didn't bring up. It looks like Ohio State is going to Indiana. Conference game. I think Indiana is actually their hours pointing up. Maybe not straight up, but I don't think it's a big deal. Maryland gets Temple. In the past couple of years, I might have said that could be something, but yeah, no. I think Maryland's on some sort of. They're like a different team with this Loxley guy. New Mexico at Notre Dame. What else we got here? Utah gets Idaho State at home. Auburn gets Kent State at home. And by the way, did you see that little jab that Gus threw after Alabama, after Saban? And I think he said something, and it was like the Alabama AD that brought up, well, I don't want to play these early games. We've had all these early games against these scrubs. And then there's a presser with Gus, and he's like, yeah, we have Kent State. I wish we could play it at noon instead of 7 because then we could get a jump on next week's opponent. Awesome. Oh, it's good. See, it's good to jest. Lamar goes to A&M. Yeah, nothing there. You got Texas takes on Rice. What is this? LSU has the Northwestern State Deacons. I don't even know what state Northwestern State's in. I'm assuming like Louisiana, maybe. I don't know. Oregon has Boise State, Portland State. Oregon has Montana. So you see it's kind of not so great. But we started the cast off saying, don't be surprised to walk away from week 3 and be like, how did that happen on more than one game that's out there? So, every week matters in college football, my friend, and that'll wrap it up.
Yeah, well, I'm going to add one little nugget for thought.
Zinger!
I'm not going to.
P.S.
Yes, this is a little postscript. And this is more for you to pay attention
Actually,
to.
I was talking about Progressive Soup. But
all right, whatever works for you. An interesting happening this week in college football, and something I'm just gonna throw out there for people to pay attention to. California made a move in their state legislature to allow players to be paid at the collegiate level. And California is known to do a lot of weird things out there, especially on the political spectrum. This is not
crazy.
This is not a political show. But what is interesting as of today is there is talk now, and the NCAA was hoping they wouldn't do it. The discussion of it'll be an unfair advantage if certain schools can do that, and that's their argument. And that's to me a little bit of a power play from the NCAA to remain relevant. And I think their days of relevancy are getting numbered, but that's another story. But what is interesting is, as of today, South Carolina, a state coming from a little bit different political twist, is looking at doing
a little bit different.
All right.
What a little bit
Again, I'm
different.
not trying to be political on this show.
I know, but we're it's the complete opposite. Let's just be honest.
But they have gone out, and there is discussions for them to also follow suit in this area. So there may be, this could be something to keep an eye on, because as we know, when we talk about college football, and we did a podcast a few months back in the off season, to pay or not to pay. And, and this is definitely a major dynamic changer.
If you haven't already, go subscribe to our YouTube channel and go back and listen.
Yeah, because this could be the beginning of a big shift in college football. One that in that podcast we talked about, unfortunately, may be inevitable given the structure of everything. But just something to keep an eye on. Again, we're not gonna have a commentary on this, because we just I got to see how this plays out. It could die on the vine, or it could be the beginning of a big tidal wave. So just something to keep an eye on.
Just to chime in on it, and I'm not gonna get political. I must say though, I'm torn. I'm torn inside, because my Tigers. Well, they're in South Carolina, and we discussed the what could happen if this continues. Or certainly, if it stands as is, it's a complete advantage from the recruiting aspect for California. So I don't like that. That's not okay in my book. If you can't get them just because they want to be a part of your program and it's the right fit, that you have to pay them. This is this is totally different in my mind than paying players when they're already on campus. Okay, this is paying to lure them in, and so I don't like it. But from the aspect that if my team has to have the opportunity to do that, just so they're not behind, I'm torn. It's we'll see where it heads, man. I can't say that I like it totally, because I don't want the greatest sport on earth to get tainted by greed and politics.
And that's an important thing, but I think, and we'll wrap up on this last nugget, because I think this actually trumps all of that. The question is, does Cam Newton's babushka make it into college football as a new trend? Will we see starting quarterbacks with the babushka?
I think he is the new face of, what is it, Blue Bonnet Margarine or whatever that is with the lady. It's they're trying to be politically correct. They made him a deal that he can't refuse. They're going to have his face on every box of butter with that thing on. Yeah.
All right. So a
Yes.
little bit of fun to wrap up the day
Yes,
and
yes.
get excited for the week. Again, we talked the schedule's a little lighter than normal, but it's football and it's always worth watching.
That's right. So we'll try to get this thing up as soon as possible this afternoon, this evening, so you can get on it before the slate of games tonight and tomorrow. And we'll be back with more stuff on fantasy NFL and certainly a recap of this next week. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Gridiron 360. That's the number 360. Or you can even check us out. We're on iTunes. And, start to like us out there on Facebook, everything. We're getting the gram hit up. So let's get active, people. We may be old, but we're staying involved. Hopefully we're not old. Hopefully we have some new listeners. Anyways, we appreciate it. Enjoy the weekend, team. Let's rock out, Dave.